Excellent. Yeah, he's been coming here for the last about 7 years. He's been teaching this class, and it's been an excellent opportunity for our students to get engaged with international justice mission, all the stuff they're doing around the world. Speaking of which, how's your Douglas Fellowship going with the Human Trafficking Institute?
It's going really, really well. I'm enjoying the people that I get to work with, and the other students that are also Douglas Fellows have been really incredible friends and great colleagues.
Great, and where are the students from that are Douglas Fellows?
So there's 7 of us from across the country. So Pepperdine, Stanford, Harvard, University of Virginia, University of Boston, and University of Chicago. Oh, and Notre Dame.
And do you get to hang out with them some?
We do. We get to go to Washington, D.C. all together once a semester.
Great. And what sort of things do they have you doing as part of your fellowship?
So we're doing a lot of research and writing regarding various areas of human trafficking. So sex trafficking and labor trafficking, which is also called forced labor. So different research and writing projects regarding those.
And is that for courts, or is that for internal memorandum, or for legislation? What's the end game of these memos?
It's kind of all of the above. So the Institute has both the Trafficking Institute website as well as a resource website called traffickingmatters.com. And on that website, some of the Douglas Fellows and other writers write case notes about different trafficking cases at the appellate levels and different areas and issues going on with trafficking cases at those levels. So we do case notes on specific cases, as well as write articles regarding just different topics of trafficking in general. So for example...
So labor and sex trafficking.
Labor and sex trafficking.
Yeah, it's my understanding that, sex trafficking has the movies done about it and, is in the popular culture, but labor trafficking actually has a higher instance of it. Isn't there more labor trafficking going on in the world than sex trafficking?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's the best estimate we have of the number of victims of trafficking worldwide is 24.9 million victims. And of that 24.9 million, about 16 million are labor trafficking victims, and then about 4.8 million, if my stats are correct, are sex trafficking victims, and then the rest of that number is state-sponsored trafficking.
Oh, good grief! So it's all over the world in sex and labor.
Yeah, both of them. And the problem is that the number of convictions are pretty low anyway, but the convictions are higher for sex trafficking and lower for forced labor, but there's more victims of forced labor, so there's kind of a discrepancy between the numbers and the number of convictions going on.
Right, and so there's some legislation I understand that's being contemplated right now in the labor trafficking realm, both nationally and internationally. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true, especially in California, actually. For example, in California, we have a Business Transparency Act, which encourages corporations to be transparent regarding their policies on their supply chains. So for example, a supply chain can be very, very complicated. One t-shirt has to go through so many things to even make it to the United States. And so the corporation in the US that is importing those t-shirts, their supply chain is trying to be tracked. And so the California law is trying to encourage corporations to have transparent supply chain policies. And then in the United States, we also have an act that prevents products that were made using forced labor from entering the country in general. Okay. So it's easier to track and be able to prevent products from coming in if we know exactly where they were made. But sometimes it's hard to know exactly where they're made.
Right.
For example, there's a factory in Vietnam that is pretty notorious for having terrible labor trafficking incidences going on in their factory. So at the border, if the US officials can tell, oh, this product was made starting at that Vietnam factory, that one's easy. That one's not going to come into the United States. But the problem is Canada doesn't have the same law regarding not importing those products, so they can just reroute those products from the US into Canada.
Wow.
And so while it's helping in the United States to not import those products, first, Canada allows them, so they just reroute them pretty quickly. And second, sometimes when you don't have a factory that's as notorious, it's hard to tell if that's actually using forced labor or not. So there's a lot of kind of loopholes with that law.
Yeah, interesting. And on the international front, it's been a lot of fun to work with the Human Trafficking Institute and our work in Uganda on human trafficking. You were there last summer for the conference, right?
Yeah, and that's actually how I ended up meeting the people at the Institute and ended up getting to apply to be a Douglas Fellow with them after meeting them there, and then spending another spring break with them in Uganda, and they asked me if I had applied. So it was pretty fun.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're going to be doing another conference with them this next summer, and then as we expand our work, figuring out which countries we can focus together on the stuff that we do on the criminal justice system as well as human trafficking.
And isn't the Global Justice Program expanding into Ghana as well?
We are. I was there last month, and then Danny, my colleague, was there a couple weeks ago, and we're in the process of creating opportunity for students to be interns in Uganda, Ghana, Rwanda, and elsewhere. And so Ghana is the next step, and we're going to have our Sudro Fellow, someone who's there for an entire year living in Ghana, to ensure that our students are connected with all the right government folks. So we're working with the Supreme Court, the prosecution's office, the police, the prisons, and kind of opening up a new front for our global justice program in Uganda. Look at this. You're going to miss this, aren't you, graduating next year?
I'm going to miss this a lot.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fun to keep up with you and figure out where things go over time.
Definitely.
All right, great to see you, Sarah.
See ya.
Take care.